David picked up a broken piece of mirror. He hid behind a tree and practiced in the mirror over and over again until he finally made an expression he was satisfied with. After that, David walked into a store and picked out a few foods he had always wanted to try. The shop owner looked at him suspiciously and asked if he had any money. David confidently pulled out the coin he had just received. The owner stared at the coin, then sarcastically told David that it wasn't even enough to buy a loaf of bread. David stood there in silence. Then, he walked out of the store alone in disappointment as he watched a happy mother and son by the roadside. Memories from years ago suddenly flooded back. The war had forced him to separate from his mother, and he remembered the loving way she used to look at him. David hid in an alley and checked to make sure the letter was still with him. That letter was the only thing keeping him going. David continued on his journey once again. On the road, he met a couple whose car had run out of gas. He ran to a gas station and asked the worker to bring over a gas can to help them. Because of that kind act, he received quite a lot of tips and bought a big bag of bread. David walked through the woods and crossed a field full of sunflowers. When he turned around, he happened to see a beautiful girl named Maria. He climbed over the wall and secretly looked inside, only to realize it belonged to a wealthy noble family. Suddenly, a boy dragged him down from the wall and snatched away his letter. David quickly grabbed the letter back, kicked the boy aside, and ran away. At that moment, he suddenly saw a wooden house on fire, so he rushed inside and rescued Maria. Maria's brother apologized to David for what happened the day before and asked him not to tell their parents that he had bullied him. David nodded and agreed. Before dinner, during prayer, Maria gently held David's hand. Whenever he was with Maria, David's smile always seemed more natural, although he looked awkward using the utensils. Everyone at the table was happy. After dinner, Maria took him to her father's study and pointed out Italy on the globe. David asked where Denmark was, and the map showed that Switzerland and Germany were still between the two countries. Just then, Maria's parents entered the study. They sent Maria away, then began asking David where he was going. David sensed something was wrong, so he lied and said he was with the circus and was on his way to meet his parents. Maria's father kept questioning whether David was lying, which reminded David of the cruel officers from the camp. David stepped back in fear. Seeing David react so strongly, the couple stopped questioning him and reassured him that they would not hurt him. That night, David took off his clothes and changed back into his old worn-out clothes. He left the bread angel, which symbolized blessing, for Maria. He felt that he did not deserve such a blessing and did not deserve anything good at all. After saying goodbye to Maria, David once again set off for Denmark. In a small town, he accidentally got caught in a conflict between soldiers and workers. During the chaos, a soldier grabbed him and locked him up, helpless. David took out the letter, only to discover that the wax seal had already been opened. He pulled the papers out of the envelope. Inside were not only his identification documents, but also detailed records from the camp. David picked up a mirror and noticed the handle on the door. He tried to pull it using the bandage wrapped around his hand. At that moment, the soldier returned with another prisoner to stop David from escaping. The soldier released the man he had just caught and rushed straight toward David. But David still managed to pull the door open and escape. After getting away from the soldier, David was completely exhausted. Just then, he suddenly heard a horn behind him. When he turned around, he realized it was the sailor he had met earlier in Italy. The kind sailor let David into the car, gave him a ride for part of the journey, and eventually dropped him off in Milan. But David's journey was still far from over. In the mountains, he met a painter. After warmly inviting him, David became Sophie's model. To thank him, Sophie invited David to her home for lunch. Her home was across the border in Switzerland. When they arrived at the border, soldiers were checking everyone's documents one by one. David immediately became nervous and quietly said that he had no papers and wanted to leave the car. Sophie gently comforted him, saying the inspections there were not very strict, but David still looked tense. Sophie explained to the soldiers that David was her grandson and that they had left in such a hurry that he forgot to bring his documents. David forced an awkward smile, and the two of them successfully passed through the checkpoint.